It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay. Welcome to the show. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Okay. 10 long years, man, doing the Opperman Report. But welcome to the show. Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Opperman Investigations, digital forensic consulting. If you need me, get a hold of me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Boy, did you hear that? Okay. Welcome to the show. If you like the show, check out our Patreon. A lot of great stuff going on in Patreon right now. Let's take a quick look. I keep telling you about that May Pang show. I like May Pang, you know. It's not a great interview, but I like her in general. And that new film is excellent. The new one called Lost Weekend, A Love Story. Brand new content went up tonight. Jeremy and Kuzmarov from the Covert Action magazine online there. He wrote a new book called Warmonger, How the Clintons' Malign Foreign Policy launched the U.S. trajectory from Bush to Biden. It's a horrible title. Okay. You know, what are we going to tell? But it's an excellent interview with Jeremy and Kuzmarov. We get into the shenanigans of the Clintons. For all the crazy people who constantly say that, Ed supports the Democrats. He never says anything about Biden. He never says anything about the Clintons. What about the Clintons, Ed? What about the Bidens, Ed? God, sakes. I'll be gone soon. Okay. I'll be out of my misery and find someone else to annoy. Chuck Ocelli interviews Ed Opperman. I was telling you about that last week when I went on a rant about strangling Chuck Ocelli, but I won't strangle Chuck. I promise. An old repeat Vince Palomera from JFK to Parkland to Bethesda, the Ultimate Kennedy Assassination Compendium. Brand new interview, Marianne Petrie. A lot of people don't seem to, at least one person. My goodness. You know, if you want 3 a.m. emails, interview Marianne Petrie. Dismantling family court corruption. Okay, and we get into, the nightmare of what our family court system is. Let's see here. The story of Mel's Hole. Don't forget that. The Art Bell story about Mel's Hole. I had another story. There's another famous story that I'm involved in. I got to take better notes. What goes, they did a study once that when people are standing online at Burger King or McDonald's or something like that, I hate to mention those names or promote them, but that they'll rehearse what they're going to order. They rehearse in their head what they're going to say when they order the food. Okay? And I've noticed to be true when you're, as a private investigator, when you're going to interview somebody, if it's a scheduled interview, which mostly they are, you watch TV and stuff like that, they show people knocking on the door, just showing up, hey, all right, let's talk, But in real life, you call someone up, you schedule an interview, you sit down together. Anyway. But people will rehearse what they're going to say to you in advance. So you kind of just have to let them burn that off, burn off that steam, and let them get out of their system what they want to say. And then I noticed the same thing too when I started doing a radio show, becoming a radio interview. And back when I used to do those 2-hour interviews, I would just let them burn it off. The first 15 minutes were just, okay, just burn off that energy, and just let them go. But what I've learned now is to let them burn that off in the pre-interview. Okay, when I get them on the show, I have a little checklist I go through when's the show going to air? When I hang up on you, it doesn't mean I'm mad at you. That's just how we edit the show. Don't curse, this little checklist I go through with each guest, don't, all this kind of stuff. And I'll ask them, is there anything important you want me to ask you that you really want the audience to know? And that's usually where they have a little script ready to go there. It's funny too, because you'll ask them, okay, let's go through the plugs. Do you have a website? Do you have a book appearance, a book signing coming up? And people get so defensive, like I'm judging them. Well, no, I don't have a website. No, oh, no, we don't have any appearances planned. No, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, I did do an interview with a YouTuber last month, and but yeah, so I try and, get them at ease during that pre-interview. Really, some funny stuff goes on there. The reason I bring this up is when I do my show each week, I'm just like everybody else, the guy online at Burger King or the guy, or even when I'm being interviewed. I stopped doing interviews. But back when I used to do interviews, I'd have my little shtick all ready to go. And I prepare what I'm going to say to you, now on Friday nights, But this week, I have a big Zoom presentation I have to do tomorrow. It's actually a settlement conference, and where we're settling a lawsuit, and a lot of it's based on what assets assets I have discovered. My asset report is a main portion of this settlement. So I have to, and I'm got to do a presentation, so I've been preparing for that in my head. And just think, man, I've been preparing these Friday night live shows, solo shows, to talk for an hour. Just imagine how much that takes out of me. And I've been doing it for 10 years, really, without a break. Whatever, I missed 10 shows over 10 years, and most of that only the past couple of years. So I got to tell you, I think this has kind of made me go a little crazy doing this live show, man. But hopefully I'll be out of my misery soon. Let's see what else here. Sean. Oh, an old repeat with Sean Atwood that really hasn't seen the light of day much. It got stuck over in the member section, the old member section, and hasn't really played much about who killed Barry Seal and Pablo Escobar. That really hasn't been published. Oh, Quinn Mitchell, this kid is 15 years old, and he's up there in New Hampshire, and he's covering the political rallies and events and stuff like that. So we interviewed him. They got kicked out of a Ron DeSantis event by Ron DeSantis' goons. So I interviewed him. Nice kid. I liked him, Done a bunch of my live shows there. And then coming up tonight, we have part 1 and part 2 of private investigator William Dorsch and his new book, Omnipotent, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We tried to get into the book, but we couldn't get away from his involvement in the John Wayne Gacy investigation. Now, William Dorsch, how I found him, because people say, hey, how do you find these guests? We got all these people, they've never done an interview before. You're the first person to interview them. I found William Dorsch because there was an attorney involved in this litigation, and I was bugging this attorney constantly trying to get him to come on the show, and he was always making excuses. And then finally he says, talk to this guy William Dorsch, man. He's involved in this, and he talks to some local press here. So I got him on the show, just blockbuster information about the cover-up. He actually met John Wayne Gacy. His wife worked with him. And he's done a lot of investigation behind the scenes. And when we get into the show tonight, you'll hear about this other location he knows of on Miami Avenue over there, this apartment building where Gacy used to do maintenance and landscaping. But they were digging trenches, 6-foot deep trenches over there for no logical reason. And clearly it was to bury these bodies. They brought out a company that does ground penetrating radar. And the company found anomalies. I have the letters from this company, by the way, where they say, we found these anomalies, we found the locations, but when the police came out and let us do the search, they wouldn't let us search in the locations where we know the bodies are. So we get into all that in far more detail, man. Great guest, William Dorsch. So it's a 2-part show tonight. Both of them are going to be about John Wayne Gacy, William Dorsch, the private investigator. Occasionally, I'm very proud of an interview, and this is one I'm very proud of. I'm proud of the first one I did with him, and I'm proud of these two as well. You're going to find out stuff about the John Wayne Gacy case that you haven't heard anywhere else, not even in all these many documentaries and Netflix and stuff like that. In fact, they came to William Dorsch, and they asked him to cooperate, but they we talk about that too, about how like, these documentary film companies, they'll try and get you on board and get you to sign an NDA, and then you can no longer talk about stuff, like I talk about here. I've been tricked a few times. I've been fooled a few times in different things that I can't talk about. I kind of hint about it, because if you sue me, man, if anybody sues me, they're going to wind up paying me to settle, because I'll keep them in court for the rest of their life. And people kind of realize that, when they start messing with me. But anyway, so William Dorsch tonight, part 1, part 2, but a lot of great stuff on our Patreon, and I encourage you to get in there and support it, because I seriously need your support. I got, I don't want to get into this, but my health is so bad right now. Right now, I got a fever now tonight doing this interview, so I'm not going to be around much longer, guys. To just get ready for that. If anybody out there, man, when any of these people start coming forward and said, "Oh, Ed was my best friend. Me and Ed were co-hosts," that kind of crap, man, I'll come back from the grave and strangle you. Just ask Chuckachilli. Okay, I'll strangle your ass, man. Bunch of good stuff coming up. I interviewed Ian Totten, who has a podcast called Deathcast about the West Memphis 3. We have that coming up. Who did I tape with? I got one coming up for you. I got a train wreck. Remember I did that week of train wreck interviews, and people got upset with me too, saying, "Oh, Ed, you had such a great show, you had so many great interviews. Why are you playing all these train wrecks? The worst of the worst." Oh, yeah. So I find this guy. He claims to be he was a firefighter, fire control technician, or whatever he calls himself, up in Antarctica, and that he discovered some equipment up there in Antarctica that could cause earthquakes. So I heard this story, and I looked up his website. Kind of an obscure guy, hard to find, like when you Google his name, it doesn't come right up, and it took a little effort to find him. And then I contacted him a few months back, and I remember him saying, "Let's do this the first month of November," but I lost him off the schedule. I couldn't find his information. And I was trying to figure out Antarctica, a firefighter, who's the guy, what's the guy. So he contacts me that afternoon to do the interview. And he goes, "Okay, I'll be calling you. We're doing our interview in an hour." And so I said, "Okay, great, let's do it. So right off the bat, off the air, he says he doesn't want to introduce himself. He wants me to introduce him, do the introduction. And that he's not a very good storyteller. He doesn't want to tell a story. He wants me to ask him questions. So I says, "Okay, fine." It was very uncooperative even before the interview. And then we get into the interview, and he's talking about Project Stargate and Ed Dames. I had some personal involvement with Ed Dames, Major Ed Dames, a remote viewer. And I'm not very impressed with that whole, these lava tubes in Hawaii and all this nonsense, I don't think his predictions have held up over the years from when he was on the Art Bell show and that whole cast of characters that were on Art Bell. I know a lot about, we'll talk about Mel's Hole and all that kind of stuff. I know what went on behind the scenes over there. And it was really entertainment. It was not a lot of fact-driven investigative reporting on the Art Bell show. As much as I love Art Bell, God, I love him. I love that show. And no one will ever replace him. It's just, the way he could turn a boring interview into a great interview, man. Art Bell is a legend. Okay, and his show, man, reached more people in overnight than you could imagine. You would go on that show, and your website would crash. You'd have so many hits on your show, But anyway, so I start interviewing our friend here this week about his Antarctica adventures. And, I'm trying to, listen, if someone has extraordinary claims, you need extraordinary proof to back up those claims. Okay. Now, he's claiming that HAARP was still active. I know it's not. I know people in Alaska. I've been very involved with my investigation on payloads in Alaska. I'm still in touch with people in Alaska. I had an ex-girlfriend who lived in Alaska. I know HAARP is not active anymore. Okay, I know this for 100% fact. Okay, it's not. But he says, oh, yes, it is. Okay, so I didn't argue with the guy. I just let him say it. Then, and the audience can listen, and then make their own judgment. I'm not here to argue with people. I did kind of get into a little... I did an interview today with a fellow. That's what I was thinking about. I did an interview today with a fellow, very nice guy. His name was Richard Otto. Okay, I found him on Facebook, and he's written these 3 books about all kinds of stuff about I guess you'd call it deep state. And politically, we disagreed about some things, and we kind of disagreed about some things. Sometimes things set me off a bit because I know what's going on. I know things behind the scenes. I know the people involved, and so it was a passionate interview, but very respectful, and I like the guy a lot, and I'm going to have him back. Okay. Unlike Mr. Antarctica, okay, who I can promise you, man, this guy's never coming back. But it got so... The guy started saying, towards the 3/4 into the interview, that he didn't even believe that I had a real radio show. He didn't believe... They thought that maybe I was a private investigator investigating him for Raytheon or something, or who knows what. I don't know what his theory was. And I kept telling him, I says, look, man, we know a lot of the same people. He was on Sean Atwood. I've been on Sean Atwood, I says, dude, Google me right now while we're on the phone. My name comes right up. It's not an obscure show. I'm kind of well known, but he was convinced that perhaps I was just like investigating him, and it wasn't a real radio show. And it went downhill from there. I kind of get the impression, coming out of Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, that really crazy internet station that I started out on, doing internet radio on Thursday mornings, And they would have a lot of guests on talking about Nibiru and the end of the world and, all kind of wacky stuff, jump rooms to Mars and Kerry Cassidy, all kind of weirdo stuff, ex-CIA, NSA, all this weirdo stuff, And, after being there a couple of weeks, I realized that these people are full of it, man. There's a bunch of them making stuff up. And it seems like there's a lot of hosts will bring people on like that, and there's like a little wink, I'm not gonna be too tough on you. I'm not gonna ask you tough questions. I'm gonna let you BS my audience. I don't know, man. If you have some kind of really serious information, and you have a chance to come on the radio and have your story and your credentials vetted, I say, do it, right? Why wouldn't you want to do that? If you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you want to be vetted? So anyway, they look forward. I want to. It's probably going to go up for free in the middle of the week. Not as I was talking to one of the guys that helps me out with the editing and stuff. I said, hey, did you listen? What do you think? And because the guys call me a hack and saying that I'm just trying to fill time, that we shouldn't put it on Patreon, because then the Patreon listeners will get upset. Oh, those guys just trying to fill time. And then we can't send out to the stations. There's just not enough there, and it's just too much bickering. And how embarrassing would that be, man? To be, you're driving in your car and you're interviewing someone, and the guy say, "Well, I don't really believe I'm on the radio." That would just be too cruel. So, and by the way, and this show here, this Friday night show doesn't go on AM FM radio. It just goes out to the podcast listeners, so it's much smaller audience. It's much more intimate. And by the way, too, there's people that only listen to this. They don't listen to any of my interviews. They just listen to this, and then have all these kind of complaints about me. Just so bizarre. This whole biggest mistake of my life was getting involved in this, man. Got a bunch of guests coming on. These are all, I got books in my hand here, brand new books that aren't even available to the public yet. One is called The Life We Chose, about William Big Billy D'Elia, mafia fellow. We're going to be talking about the Fugazis later on today. Hopefully, if I have time, already 20 minutes in. Dying for Capitalism, a book by Charles Derber. State of the Free Press in 2024. And Searching for Patty Hearst. Now, those are just the books I have in my hand. We have a bunch of really, really big interviews lined up and planned. I think we're covered all that stuff I needed to get out of the way. But stay tuned tonight for William Dorsch. Really good stuff. Okay, now, there's some serious people that listen to the show that are appreciative of my weekly rundowns on the Trump litigation. And this was a pretty big week here with Trump testifying, his daughter testifying. So I want to get into some of that, even though it seems like it was years ago that Trump testified, that his daughter testified. And then there's the others who just, whenever I mention the name Trump right away, oh, Ed, you're Trump, what's that, Trump derangement syndrome. Oh, Ed, you just hate the Trump. Oh, everything is, I'm just telling you what's going on. I don't know what to tell you, man. There was a thing this week with Trump where he was acting very bizarrely on the stand. And when he took the witness stand, he was very combative. He was repetitive, repeating himself and making these long-winded arguments. And the judge was like saying, what is this? This isn't a campaign speech. You get to the point. And there's a theory out there that, Trump was doing this to egg on the judge, and the judge would lose his temper, and then this would be a grounds for appeal, that the judge was acting improper, right? Which is just absolutely ridiculous, First of all, this is the penalty phase. This is the damages phase of this litigation. Trump has already been ruled. Judge Engron has already ruled that Trump and the Trump organization is a fraud, that they've used fraudulent documents, fraudulent financial statements, and it's been a pattern of this, okay, over 10 years. That's done. So what are you going to appeal? You want to appeal that portion. What are you going to appeal now? This business about the damages? But there was something, and you'll see people like on court TV chat rooms and stuff like that, they're watching a trial, and they'll say, well, I think that this lawyer right now, they're doing a bad job because they want to throw the trial, and then later on, the defendant, Casey Anthony, one of these people, can file an appeal based on ineffective counsel, okay? Which is the stupidest thing on the face of the earth. You don't want to be in a trial hoping for an appeal. You want to throw all your grenades during that trial. Mistrial is great. The second trial is always better because witnesses die, things happen when the evidence gets old and stale. But this business about throwing a case in order to appeal is insanity. And this idea that it was a strategy to egg on the judge and get the judge to lose his temper. A judge is allowed to lose their temper. That happens all the time. Okay, that's nothing. The judge did make an error this week, though, when there was a motion from the defense about that Trump speaks like a mob boss. The judge made a comment that, hey, that perfect phone call with Zelensky kind of sounded like a mob boss or coded language. So now that means that the judge said in open court that he's relying on evidence and information that has not been presented within the four walls of that courtroom. He's relying on information he has from outside that courtroom from watching the Zelensky hearings on TV. That can be an error, okay, that could be used in an appeal. And I got to tell you something. That would be an error that a judge could live with. And I think a judge could live with that kind of error comfortably if there was say $25 million placed in a bank account someplace for that judge. Okay? Because we're talking about a lot of money here. And then this is all money judgments. And the penalties would be that the Trump family would not be allowed to do business in New York State for many, many, many years. And they even put in second provisions in there that if they created entities outside of New York and tried to transfer that he has to that has to be supervised too as well. Now, the big defense here all along, okay, very fast. The big defense here all along has been, well, I don't know what's going on. Okay, Don Jr. says he has no idea what's in those financial statements. That's what we pay the accountants for. Ha, ha, ha. Okay. And then Ivanka comes on there and she says, well, I don't know anything. What's going on here? I don't know anything. Even though they found an email with her and Deutsche Bank, where Deutsche Bank said that in order for them to obtain this loan, that the Trump organization had to have $4.2 billion in assets. And she was trying to get them to lower that to $2 billion. So she was acknowledging that the $4.2 billion was inflated. Okay. Now, but they're all trying to say that they don't know what's going on. Okay. Almost to the point that they're saying, well, I was just walking down the street and I saw the sign that said Trump, and I walked in, and there was a desk there with my name on it, and I sat down, and some people put papers in front of me, and I just signed them and walked out. So they're trying to claim for the whole thing. They got this freaking reality TV show guy into the White House because people said, well, he's a great businessman. Trump is a wheeler dealer. He's a decision maker. He's you're fired, right? And people bought into that crap. And now the entire Trump family is saying, well, we don't know what's going on in this business. We have no idea. It was Alan Weisselberg, the CFO. He was in charge of that. He did that. He did this. He did everything. So then why can't we just, if the whole idea was that Trump is this great businessman to elect him president, why not elect Alan Weisselberg? You want to know why we can't? Because he's a convicted felon. Okay? Alan Weisselberg was convicted. He pled guilty on 15 criminal charges, including grand larceny, criminal tax fraud, and falsifying business records, which is what they're all on trial for now. So the best case scenario if this Trump defense is they're saying, hey, we don't know what went on here. It was Alan Weisselberg, and he's already been convicted of what they're being charged with here. Okay? So they're saying, well, the guy who's been convicted of falsifying business, he was in charge. So how are they going to try and say that this wasn't a big pile of fraud? I don't know. They're putting on their defense now, their defense witnesses now. And the judge is bending over backwards, allowing them to bring in these experts, which are going to be experts on the value of Mar-a-Lago. They've got this thing in their head about this. The value of Mar-a-Lago back in 2011 was set at $18 million by the county assessors down there in Palm Beach County. And that was based on deed restrictions and all kinds of stuff. Plus, remember, there was a big real estate crash in 2008. Of course, 2011 things was less than they are valued today. But the range was 18 million to 28 million. The 28 million, yeah, which later on in 2020, they said 28 million. No one's saying that Mar-a-Lago is worth today 18 million. No one's saying that. Not even the local tax assessors saying that. So people keep emailing me, messaging, saying, do you really believe Mar-a-Lago is only worth 18 million? No one does. No one's saying that. The only one saying that is Trump. That someone's saying that. Show me where anybody's saying it. See, this is why I'm convinced that the next stage of this operation is Trump is going to fire his attorneys, much like Darrell Brooks. Remember Darrell Brooks? That guy, I kept telling everybody to watch that Waukesha, Wisconsin case with Darrell Brooks, who ran down all those people in the Christmas parade, and he was defending himself, and he was a sovereign citizen. And he would start off every morning saying, well, Your Honor, we have to establish subject matter jurisdiction. Your Honor, it still hasn't been established, subject matter jurisdiction. Well, which is one of those sovereign citizen catchphrases that they use, which just means, hey, does this court have jurisdiction over this litigation? And clearly it does. But they think subject matter jurisdiction is some kind of a catchphrase or some kind of secret code, and if you say it over and over again. And what the other, and he would just say all these bizarre things. And I could just see if Trump were, what's the next thing? Trump fires his attorneys, represents himself, declares he's a sovereign citizen. Again, he wasn't driving; he was traveling. What would you be surprised at this point if that happened? I would not be surprised. And I got to tell you something. I don't think that Trump would come off one iota bit less crazy than Darrell Brooks. Okay, not one iota bit, not one bit. I got to tell you something. I have a friend who's in that courtroom down there in New York almost every single day. She's a New York reporter. She doesn't want to come on the show just because of some of my anyway. But according to her, Trump appeared very unstable, okay, on that witness stand. And for some reason, people don't want to report it. I guess it's too offensive or it's too bold. Let me see. Some of the things, I can't remember some things she was telling me. I don't think I have it in my notes. I don't think I do have it in my notes. So I'll have to, maybe if I remember that, I'll come back next week and tell you. Okay. All right, let's see. So oh yeah, by the way too, man, there's chances too that they could be charged criminally after this trial. Hey, Hunter Biden is suing Patrick Byrne, the Overstock.com guy who was in that off the rails meeting there. He's suing him for defamation complaint for defamation because he's saying that Patrick Byrne claimed that he took money from Iran, and I guess he took sought a bribe from Iran. So I suppose we're going to be able to see that fall apart too as well. Okay, I played a show, a repeat this week about his name is Rico. He wore a cubic zirconium, and this was about the Rico charges when Trump was first charged with Rico charges, and I wanted to make a little play on Rico. And that who was that guy? Song, his name is Rico. Copacabana song there by I forget the guy who sings that song. I wonder where he is today, right? He's been on the Mike Douglas show all the time. I wonder what's going on there. Anyway. And he puts a comment on YouTube saying, "Ed, are you trying to say it was a Fugazy?" Right? And he was trying to say Fugazy. And people know this expression Fugazy from the movie Donnie Brasco, because when the guy comes in with the ring, what's his name? Not De Niro, Pacino. Al Pacino was playing the character there in the Donnie Brasco movie. And he says, I got this ring, how much is it worth? And Donnie Brasco goes, well, it's a Fugazy. Fugazy means it's a fake. Right? So, but people don't realize that there's a whole reason how that expression Fugazy came about. And it comes out about because in New York, back in the 80s, the late 70s and the 80s, there was these late night TV commercials all the time for Fugazy, Bill Fugazy, and Fugazy limousines. And what do I have for you? I have the commercial. I'm going to play it for you. Okay, so listen tight.
Are you tired of fighting for a taxi, being cramped in messy cabs, and ending up missing your plane or a crucial appointment?
Hi, this is Bob Fugazy Continental Hope announcing the expansion of Fugazy Continental's limousine service into Westchester and Fairfield counties. Reserve a Fugazy sedan or limousine for a fine ride and maximum comfort. Not much more expensive than a taxi.
Okay, and that particular commercial had Bob Hope on there, but they would have Bill Fugazy would do the thing. And the reason how this whole thing came out about the name Fugazy being associated with a fraud or a fake or a wannabe is because you'd see these commercials with these big stretch limos and these town cars, Bill Fugazy. But then when you went to order one of these limos and they would show up, it would be this old, dirty car. It wasn't the prestigious limousine experience you were expecting. And if you were an organized crime figure, I guess back in those days, I'm a little out of touch these days, but you would have a driver and you'd have a town car. You'd drive around in your town car, you'd have your driver, your bodyguard with you. So if you didn't have a bodyguard and a driver and a town car, you would call up Bill Fugazy, okay, and get me a town car to take me there. I want to look impressive when I'm out, meeting with my gavones, at the coffee shop, right? So and then they would say, oh, the guy's a Fugazy. He's not a real wise guy. He's not a real gangster. He's a wannabe gangster. He's a Fugazy. That's a Fugazy limousine. So that's how the whole Fugazy thing came about in New York City back in the late 70s and 80s. As a matter of fact, this is funny because I had a limousine. I had a limo driver when I was 19 years old, 20 years old. Way up until, my first limo driver was this guy who was a nice guy. He ran this little, I found his ad, and it was a one-man show. But then he started advertising his limo company on the Playboy pornography channel. On the Playboy channel on cable TV, he had an ad for his limousine company. And then this was like in it wasn't late 80s. No, it was like very early 80s, like 1982. And or maybe like 85 or no, it would have to be like before 85. And because he advertised on the Playboy channel, they gave him tickets to go to the Playboy Mansion, with all the advertising. And says, Ed, you want to go to the Playboy Mansion with me? Let's go. So I went to the Playboy Mansion with him. And it's the first time I was ever there. But it was a sad occasion. This is before Hef was back on Viagra and back out there doing things again. And it was just a very sad night there of advertising people and playmates that were looking at their watch when their shift was over and they could go home. It wasn't a celebrity-filled night of pleasure that you hear about the legendary Playboy Mansion. So he was my first limo driver. Then my second limo driver was Joey the Worm. This was, oh my God, I wasn't even thinking about telling you about this. My second limo driver was Joey the Worm. I don't remember his real name. Joey the Worm. And fascinating guy. He and his father-in-law would do these stick-ups, these robberies, where they would like drive a car, they'd steal a car, and they'd drive it into the window of like a fur store or a jewelry store and stuff like that, and then run in there and steal all the furs and jewels and run out. A crash and grab, they called it, And then he would blow all the money, going to Hawaii on helicopter tours in Hawaii and stuff like that. Joey the Worm. Oh my God, I forgot all about him. Oh, I'm gonna do a whole show on Patreon, and I'm going to go back over all the stuff about Pete Stenistrud, Pete the Nut, who was my bodyguard driver when I was like still in high school. I was like an 18-year-old kid, and back then I looked on his obituary. You can look it up yourself, Peter Stenistrud on Staten Island. And so I figured out he was about 35. I always figured he was like 45, late 40s. He looked so old when he was driving for me, And we called him Pete the Nut because he had mental health issues, and they kept putting him in a mental health institution, Staten Island Psychiatric Center. I used to go in there and visit him, take care of him in there. I think I told the story one time about how I was bringing up some bottles of soda, and they stopped me and says, hey, are those glass bottles? Because you can't bring any glass in here. And meanwhile, I had two guns on me. I had a shoulder holster and an ankle holster, walking in there with two loaded guns. But I thought, oh, no glass on me. Don't worry. Okay, come on in. Things are so different back in those days, man. Things are so different. But I had my own limo driver when I went to see, I had to go visit some guys in Brooklyn, okay, who were organized crime fellows. And the first thing they said to me was, well, what are you, Fugazy? And I didn't really understand what the expression meant. I heard of Fugazy limousines, and I heard of people saying Fugazy, but I wasn't pretending to be some kind of... Usually what would happen back in those days, if you were a youngster, our age, okay, and you were involved in some kind of criminal activity, you were dealing drugs or something like that, you were doing stick-ups and things, it's extortion, right away the first thing out of your mouth is, oh, my uncle's this guy, my cousin's that guy, I'm with this guy, I'm with that guy. Well, you'd be dropping names of all these people. And some of these people were legit. They did have these people in their family and stuff like that. Well, I wasn't a friend, but a guy I knew who his father was killed by organized crime on Staten Island. And he was a tough kid. He was a short, but a tough kid. He got shot like 7 or 8 times on like 7 or 8 different occasions. He got shot, and lived through it all. And one time he was out, everyone knew the kind of weight I was moving. And so then later on, years later, when I was working the Beeper Company back in the Staten Island Mall, he comes through, and he was from from Florida. He was living down in Florida, but he was back on Staten Island. He had this big tank top and this big gold chain with this big giant nugget on and suntan. And he comes over, he's looking at the Beepers and stuff like that, and he walks away, and he comes back, and he goes, I know you. And I was like, oh, God. I said, okay, I'm Eddie Opperman. Who are you? Okay, no, I don't care. I care less and less. And he tells me who he was. And I said, oh, okay, great. But we didn't have a problem, We never had a beef or anything like that, so we got along good. And then he went back to shopping with his girlfriend, and he came back again, and he goes, you were moving a lot of weight. That's when we were teenagers, But I guess I was talking about, I wasn't expecting to talk about a lot of this. But that first time when they said, what are you, Fugazy? Okay, here's what I was going to say. That on one of those occasions, I was a kid. 18 years old, living with my parents still. I was living with my parents, but still, that last year of high school and stuff like that, I was staying in Manhattan a lot. And pretty much out on my own. But my legal address is my parents' house in Staten Island. And there was this guy who was about my age, and we had a little dispute over some money and some stuff. And he starts saying to me all this stuff. He goes, you know who my uncle is? You know who my father is? And I says, yeah, I know who your uncle is. I know who your father is. And they know me. And I said, you know who my father is? My father's an accountant. My father works as an accountant for the Children's Aid Society. You don't have to worry about my father. You don't have to worry about my uncle. You got to worry about me right here in front of you right now. And this guy, like all the life went out of his face, man. All this, who my uncle is, who my father is, Oh, God. So anyway, I go meet with these guys in Brooklyn, and they're right, oh, what are you, Fugazy? And I says, no. I says, guys, everything I do, I got my own guys. I got my own people. I'm not kicking up to anybody. I don't plan to. I don't plan on kicking up to anybody. I didn't have to kick up to anybody until we got into the nightclub business. When I was doing my marijuana stuff back on Staten Island, I didn't kick up to anybody, man. I wouldn't even dream of it, man. I wouldn't even entertain that at all. You had to kill me. And some of the other spots were run by the Colombo family was running Willowbrook and College of Staten Island. Those 2 spots over there, they used to sell this hash. No, it was a Thai stick. They used to call it Thai stick, Thai weed, that they would get off these container ships would come in, and they'd sell it over there. And so it was me and them, and the 2 major forces of marijuana on Staten Island at that time. And I wasn't afraid of these people at all. I had my own guys. A lot of my guys, too, were, a lot of them were crazy. I had these bikers up in the Midland Beach area. And then I had cops. I had a bunch of cops that worked for me, too, guys who had just become cops. This is when we were on 25. I had my cops. One of the things I did with that managed to smooth things over with those Brooklyn guys was when I was meeting with them in my limousine. Where I picked them up in my limo with my limo driver. That was the guy with the Playboy advertising. That guy. And he wasn't a bodyguard or anything. He was just a guy. And we picked them up in Brooklyn to meet with them. And one of my other connections was Tennessee. I used to get these marijuana from these growers in Tennessee. So one time they came up and they had dynamite. Okay, because back in those days you could legally buy dynamite in Nevada, Arizona, places like Tennessee. You could legally go into a store and buy it. There wasn't even until years later you had to show your driver's license to buy it. You could just buy it without a license at that stage. So they had this dynamite. So when I was meeting with these guys, I had one of my cops with me, I think, and I was meeting with these Brooklyn guys, and they were going to shake me down. You know, their plan was that these guys were going to try and shake me down. But I said to them, I says, hey, look, I've got this, and I'm holding up 2 sticks of dynamite. I brought this with you to show you. I've got this dynamite. I can get you all you want. I can sell you this dynamite. And not only that, I can get the blasting caps and timers. I can even assemble it for you. And once again, I'm watching all the blood drain out of these guys' face. And these are grown men. I was a kid, man, but these are grown men. And I got to tell you, man, you know, I'm sitting around here today. It's been a long life. And I talk to people, man, you know, I tell them, man, listen, someone tells me they're broke, they need to make some money. I said, well, listen, I got a lot of projects here. We can make a lot of money. That's all we got to do. I just need some help. You know, all legal stuff. And the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, what do I have to do? I can't do that. Oh, I don't know how to do that. When I was a kid, when I was, man, like coming up, you know, I would, on a dime, leave my house with $50,000, $100,000 cash, go out into the desert of Arizona or go over the border to Mexico. Sometimes by myself, or maybe one or two other guys with me, you know, for an opportunity to advance my life, to make some money, you know, and have an adventure. And man, that does not exist anymore. That just does not exist anymore. The only people like that now are these youngsters with like no impulse control and can't even put a sentence together, and they're just like I'm hopped up on all kind of drugs out there that are dead in 24 hours. The idea of someone, you know, just having the balls to do anything, I don't see it at all out there anymore. And anyway, I guess I'm getting old, getting tired, getting sick. I'm sick again this week. I got a fever again this week, and. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, my health is really bad. I'm not going to be around much longer. You know, it would be nice if we had some support on my way out here. You know, I had some support with the Patreon. I had some donations come in every now and then to help me through my last, you know, year or two, you know, comfortably, you know, without the struggling as much as I have to do now, because there's a lot of work I can't do anymore, a lot of stuff I can't do anymore. You'd think, you know, I had an audience with me for 10 years that would want to support the show, but no. And even doing this kind of stuff is just so much more difficult. You know, I'm looking at a stack of books here, you know, 4 books right in front of me. These publishing companies, sure, they seek me out because they know that when they come on the show, you sell books. But it's so difficult, you know, now, just like calling up a guest and saying, hey, I'd like to book you for my show, because there's all these idiot podcasters out there with this nonsense, you know. They can't put a question together. It's all recorded. A lot of them are just reading scripts, man, you know. And people don't want to be bothered, man. You know, they you know, I have to get into this whole spiel. Oh, yeah, I've been doing this 10 years. Yeah, I'm on all these stations. Yeah, I do this. Oh, I don't want to look at my numbers. Like, you got to do all that, man. And it's just exhausting. So, let's see. That's about it. Fugazy. Okay. That story kind of went off in different directions I wasn't planning to go into. But I am going to put up the whole story, all from the beginning of my smuggling days and and Pete. And Pete was involved, too, in the whole thing, meeting Beagenwald, the serial killer. And that whole story about when I got those guys, when I got that phone call in the middle of the night, and they wanted me to lure this guy out to kill him. They wanted me to lure my friend out to kill him. And I told him, well, how much does he owe you? And he says, well, he owes us, I forget how much it was. And I says, well, how much do you charge him per pound? And I said, well, we charge him $7.50. And I said, okay, fine. Charge me $9.50 until his bill is paid off, and then everybody's cool, And so, but what they had taken, they had gone to his house the night before and roughed him up and took his pot back from him, and they sold it to me. And so the next day he calls, I'm out. I need some stuff. I said, yeah, I know. I didn't tell him. So I actually went and sold him back his own stuff. But what the part with that was is when that's a great story. I'll tell that whole story and all the whole thing because it's all the same guys. Part of that deal was when those Mexican guys called me up to lure him out, and then they want me to come to them and buy some stuff from them. I'm going in, and I know they have killers in town with them. They want money, and here I'm walking in there. So I used my other guys, my Tennessee growers who were Vietnam vets and stuff like that, to be my security for that deal. And then I sold the guy back his own pot. That's a great story, man. I've told it on here before. But I'm going to tell all that stuff because it's all the same people over and over again. And I don't think I've ever tied it all together and explained who was who and how they were all connected. And how the Tennessee guys were involved with Beagenwald, the serial killer, how they were involved with selling a guy back his own pot, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm exhausted. I got a fever. I'm making no sense. I got a big presentation I got to do tomorrow. Huge. Actually, not really a huge payday for me, but it's a huge payday for the clients, man. It's very serious money for them. I got to do the right, be on top of that. Coming up after this will be William Dorsch, private investigator William Dorsch. He lives in Bulgaria. And he tells me about how nice it is over there in Bulgaria. I believe him. The USA is going downhill, man. We live like slaves in this country, man. I was talking to this guy today, Otto, about how we spend all this money on arms and military-industrial complex and surveillance and intelligence. All that money just down the drain, man. For what? So we can live like slaves here in poverty and misery. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed the show. All right, good night. But check out William Dorsch. These are two good shows tonight, okay? Good night.